Bin Laden is dead. Now what? Next.
My daddy served in the army. We lost his right eye, but he flew a flag out in our yard. Till the day that he died, he wanted my mother, my brother, my sister, and me to grow up and live happy in the land of the free. Now this nation that I love is falling.
The people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
Clearly, through our big black eye, man, we lit up your world like
justice has been done.
Welcome to the Stan Simpson Show, a program about Connecticut people and compelling issues. Make it a point to drop in every week. The world is abuzz about the U.S. takedown of public enemy number one, Osama bin Laden. So, what will be the fallout? Can we expect retaliation from extremists? Has President Obama sealed his re-election chances in 2012? And how will the Middle East respond to the permanent removal of a terrorist mastermind? We'll talk with former Congressman and CIA operative Rob Simmons and University of Hartford political scientist Bilal Sekou, a recent convert to the Islamic religion, in our second segment. We'll talk about a historic state budget passed by lawmakers this week and what it means for you. Hartford Current Capitol Bureau Chief Chris Keating joins us. Then we'll wrap things up with an influential education reformist. Alex Johnson, the CEO of CONCAN, is leaving his post this year. He gives us his exit report. But first, the fallout over bin Laden. Agent Rob Simmons, former agent. Bilal Sekou, is this former agent? Sometimes I think you're still an agent, and your cover is that you're a former agent.
Don't blow my cover, Stan. Please.
This was a historic moment, a seminal moment in American history. Let's get to the pictures now. Folks are aware of what happened. The pictures. The president is saying now that he will not release the pictures. Your thoughts? Should he?
Well, I think he should, and I will say this. The president has been intimately involved with this operation. In the past, presidents frequently try to put a little distance between themselves and some of these covert operations. But in this case, President Obama has chosen to be in the Situation Room. He's photographed in the Situation Room. He's declared that he made the decision. He watched the operation unfold. And I would say that, there's a reasonable expectation that images and photographs of the operation should be revealed. It's my understanding that he was going to do it. I say, do it, get it over with, and get on with it.
Actually, I'm of a different opinion, Stan. I think that, the problem with this is, one, I think the audience who really wants to know about this is not our allies, for example, who are really not convinced that this killing took place. I imagine that if those photos are out there, they will be shared with key leaders in other countries in order to, for them to confirm this kill. But I think on the other hand, this could play very negatively in the Middle East. I think, certainly there are people in the Middle East who have real questions about whether this occurred. But I think there also are elements there who would use this just as they would have used a burial site or an actual funeral as a way to sort of propagandize, this killing and then to use that, to do further harm to the country. So I don't really see a real benefit in this at all.
How about the issue as a journalist, though? The journalist, the issue of free speech, the issue of history, the issue of just coming off the whole birther issue with the documentation on being born took years to settle. I'm going to tell you right now, I want to see the photos as a journalist. I think we should see them, and it kind of puts the exclamation point on this seminal moment in American history.
And we've been through this before, Stan. Abu Ghraib, there were over 1,200 photographs of Abu Ghraib. The argument was that releasing those photographs are going to inflame our enemies. Well, quite frankly, our enemies are already inflamed. I mean, they took down the World Trade Center. They sank the USS Cole. They've blown up our embassies. So they're already inflamed. I went through and watched all 1,200 photos and was satisfied that there wasn't really anything in there that I found too unusual, and that was the end of the story. Mm-hmm. But if you withhold, as you say, the media is going to continue to pick at this, people will continue to pick at it, as they did with the birth certificate. And it creates something that's bigger than it really should be. show the photos, show the funeral ceremony, get it over with, and move on. We got other issues to discuss here in America, especially in these tough times.
Yeah, and we all know, I think, at some point the photos will likely be leaked by somebody. We all know that, right? At some point they get leaked by somebody.
So get it out and get it over with.
As a CIA operative, Rob Simmons, talk to me about this issue of the actual strike itself. I mean, this was an extraordinarily risky strike. You didn't have to go this pervasive into the territory. You could have done it with aerial strikes.
Right.
Talk about the operation from a CIA operative, from your angle.
Well, I don't want to diminish the excellence of our forces. They did a fabulous job, but understand this. They have been doing this on a regular basis over a number of years. The Bush administration recreated these capabilities that we had years ago. They've been running these types of targeted operations in Afghanistan and elsewhere around the world. So the people that conducted this strike, the only thing that made this strike substantially different from others that they've done is the target himself, who was very high profile.
Let me ask you this. If they failed, would we have heard about it?
We always do. We always hear about our failures. Frequently, the successes we don't hear that much about. But in this particular instance, again, because the target was Osama bin Laden, that made this a much higher profile operation. But the basic techniques of the operation have been refined. They recreated the enclave. They practiced twice in Afghanistan before going into Pakistan. The thing that was unusual about me were two things. One, we went in black to a country that was supposedly a friendly country, Pakistan. We didn't tell them we were coming.
Right.
And two, what if Pakistani military forces had engaged our forces during the course of this operation? That could have created a real problem.
Your thoughts, Professor Sekou. Pakistan. How the heck is Osama bin Laden in Pakistan and the government unaware? Your thoughts on whether or not were they covert?
Well, I think as we were talking in the green room, that's one of the more interesting questions that I think will, if you're asking me what reporters should try to unearth rather than those pictures, is really that story.
That's right. I
think we've spent billions of dollars aiding the Pakistan, and here this guy is right down the street from a major military establishment there, hiding out in the open in a heavily fortified, home that clearly stood out in the neighborhood. And so, that to me is one of the more critical questions.
Is it plausible? Is it plausible for him to be there in Pakistan and the government or folks there not know?
I don't think it is.
This area has a lot of retired military. It has the equivalent of West Point or Annapolis. There have been a lot of associations with the ISA, which is Pakistani intelligence, and certain terrorist groups in Abbottabad. So no, I can't believe they didn't know that something unusual was taking place here. And the irony is that if you look at U.S. News and World Report, hunting bin Laden, the picture is of a mountainous region. Well, guess what? He was hiding in plain sight.
Right.
He wasn't in a mountainous region on the border. He was on the India border within an hour's drive of Islamabad. So this is a very unusual situation, and I don't believe that people in the Pakistani government knew nothing about it. Somebody knew about it, I'm convinced.
The question I have now is who dropped the dime, right? Somebody very close to that whole compound dropped the dime, and I'm curious to how that person gets taken care of, because they have to do something with that person who cooperated, but who close to the ground could have said to the U.S., hey, we got your guy here? And that's what I'm very curious about.
Well, most of the information that was developed on him being in this location was developed through waterboarding during the Bush administration.
Are you a proponent of waterboarding? Do you believe in it?
I believe in enhanced interrogation techniques, yes, under certain conditions.
Somebody call it torture.
Well, I don't call it torture because it's a technique that, ironically, is sufficiently unpleasant for the subject that they feel that having gone through it, now they have obligated or they have done their duty to resist, and now they can speak. And some of the Muslims who have been waterboarded have actually said that. Having been waterboarded, now I think that I can talk because I've done my duty to resist as much as I can.
Professor, your thoughts on waterboarding? And do we know for sure that waterboarding created this or not, but your thoughts on the tactic of waterboarding.
Actually, I think it is torture. But, I think the question is still out there about how they actually got this information. It's not completely clear if it came from the interrogations, if it came from just intelligence on the ground. Certainly when you think about this war that we've been executing for, quite some time over in Afghanistan, it really raises the question of whether intelligence and the kind of work that the intelligence community can do is really the route that we ought to be taking with this, rather than having so many boots on the ground and spending so many billions of dollars. I mean, this is just amazing. We're able to execute this, though I have problems with the way this occurred. Generally I'm opposed to the death penalty, and I think executing anyone is not justice, it's murder is what it is. But certainly there is an appetite to see him, brought to justice. But there are real questions, I think, now with this having occurred. Where do we go from here? Do we continue with the amount of troops we have now in Afghanistan, the effort we've been embarked on for a decade just about, or do we move in another direction, and what is that direction? I think those are the kind of questions
we're tight on time
you reporters are.
And we're going to try to fit it all this time. We're going to extend the segment here, guys, about maybe 3 more minutes. We're going to keep things tight here. Politically now, 212, does this seal the re-election for Obama?
I don't think any election is sealed. Remember that George Herbert Walker Bush had 80% ratings after we pushed Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait. A year later, he lost to a guy called Bill Clinton, who had come out of nowhere. So I don't think any election is sealed by any particular incident a year and a half before the election. Most Americans that I talk to, although they're interested in what's happened the last couple of days, they're concerned about gas prices, they're concerned about their job, they're concerned about a foreclosure of their homes, they're concerned about the cost of food, and these are the domestic issues that I think are going to determine who wins next year.
But having confidence in the president is also important, and if it's not a valid or viable opposition, having confidence in the incumbent is huge. Obama's confidence level, at least right now today, has increased.
On this issue. Yes.
And I think, as the Congressman has suggested, what voters really do is they vote on the basis of pocketbook issues. And, this will, within a year's time, I have real questions about whether this will still be the kind of story that people will be paying close attention to. And I think, and that's part of the reason why I think about the pictures not coming out, because the pictures will keep this story out there for many people, in other parts of the world. And so
but politically, doesn't Obama need that? I didn't mean to cut you off, but politically for Obama, wouldn't that help him to get those pictures up in about 15 seconds? Wouldn't it help him to get it out there to kind of fortify him as a strong leader internationally and someone who you can trust as an overall leader?
But the international community doesn't vote for the president. Americans vote for the president. And I think Americans are convinced that Osama bin Laden is dead. And it's the international community who may not be convinced, but they can't vote.
All right, we're going to wrap this up right here. When we come back, folks, Hartford current Capitol Bureau Chief Chris Keating tells us how a historic $40 billion state budget will affect your wallet. Don't go away. You're watching The Stan Simpson Show. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter.